Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your host, Sam Bradley. Today we've got a really special guest. We're talking to a member of the justice system who has frontline experience with the war on drugs. How are you doing? You being looked after?
Yes, very good. Thank you very much.
Nice to see you, sir. So we're going to get straight into it now. First of all, what is the history of the war on drugs? How long has it been going on, in this country at least?
I think in one form or another it's been going on for probably hundreds of years. I think in this country we've seen changes in society that have then driven legalisation and they've informed and coloured the law that we have.
Right. So what has been the change in public perception of drugs?
Well, I think going back in my experience, if you look at history, as far as I'm aware, the drugs at some level that were now considered, say, for example, controlled, were at one time considered medicinal.
Like opiates, like heroin, and
so
marijuana.
if you look at opium, if you look at those derivatives of drugs, you'll see that there was an attitude and a society that was accepting of them in a different form. They weren't a problem. Or
why?
I think knowledge and awareness of the effects and a deeper understanding of the long-term effects of the use of those drugs is one thing. Okay. I think that a society that's informed as we are now has a much more informed view, backed up by a lot more knowledge and experience, about drugs.
So you think people were okay with it 50 years ago because they didn't know why it was bad to maybe do a line of coke for your toothache, for example?
Yeah, I think ignorance is bliss, isn't it? I think if you look at, nicotine's a drug. And not many decades ago, there was far, far more acceptance about the use of nicotine in society. Movie stars smoked them as a way of being cool, and young people mirrored that as a way of being cool, and as emulating their heroes, and it was almost a prop, in entertainment and the media world.
So do you think
it's not as acceptable?
Do you think nicotine's going to be? Do you think nicotine and cigarettes are going to be illegal in 50 years? Then do you think there will be an attitude towards nicotine in 50 years that there is to marijuana now?
Possibly. I mean, I couldn't say. I think there is in nicotine, against what you're saying, nicotine against marijuana, a perfect example of where society's influence has changed or is changing and may well change the overall attitude to them. So 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, you could smoke in a workplace. Some people just didn't like it.
Yeah.
Now it's almost
that's a culture change, isn't it? Like you said some people didn't like it, but it didn't really matter then because people didn't like it. Well, you don't like it, sorry. Is that just like society getting more open-minded to other people's feelings and then wanting to please the masses? So, we're going to hold all drugs at an arm's length because there is a small group of society who we don't want to talk about who do drugs. And there is an argument to say that people can do drugs. Some people can do drugs and be fine. As was proven back in the days of people who used to get prescribed doses of heroin. They were doctors and lawyers, and they went about their business. What do you think of something like that?
I think that.
Do you think there is a place for it in society? Some people can't get by without it, but can get by on it.
I think the origin of first of all, I think the part of your question around what was and what is acceptable very much informs what then happens on a legal basis. Society's attitude drives change in law to an extent.
Is that right, though?
I think it can be right. I think the law,
Because that's populist politics, isn't it? Essentially. In populist politics, they have their benefits, but also, as we've seen quite recently, I guess sometimes populist politics aren't always the best thing long term. So should populist opinion be driving law or the creation thereof?
I don't know about populist opinion. I think we live in a democracy, and I think democracy defines the law, for the people, by the people to a great extent. We vote the lawmakers, and the lawmakers are people that are voted in. I think that's right and proper, and it's fair and even. And then those people go on to reflect society's needs and protection for society by setting those laws in government.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's helpful and positive, and I think that a society that runs like that, for me, is a good one that reflects and mirrors what society is wanting. The fact that we're talking about drugs and addictive substances is another facet of that reflection of society. Once upon a time, as you said to begin with, society was accepting of it, and people took certain drugs as a medicinal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
More is then found out, more information is then known, and then law has a responsibility to protect. It has a responsibility to to look after people, for want of a better phrase, because of the knowledge and awareness upturn around those things. So once upon a time it was acceptable to take a drug, like you said, for a toothache or something. Then when more information is known about it, it's then realised that the longer term effects perhaps of that particular drug are not good for people, so law has to be created to protect them.
So you're down with a system that would... Because when people are picking a government, that's the difference, isn't it, between right and left. Right thinks, I would say that one side thinks that people should look after themselves. Maybe more conservative people should look after themselves. There's always the argument of, well, you should work your way out of poverty. Conservatives would say you should work your way out of poverty and whatnot, and that you should look after yourself. Whereas the left-hand side of politics says, well, the government should be there to look after the people. So sort of trying to infer that you're for a system where the government looks after the people rather than legalising everything and saying, well, there you go, you look after yourselves.
I think people in a society have a duty and an obligation, if they are able to and capable of and competent to, look after themselves and make right decisions about their own well-being.
Doesn't that open you up to say, well, if that's the view we should take on society, that people should be able to look after themselves to some extent, then we think that maybe legalisation is the answer and we regulate it, obviously, as has been done in parts of America. Marijuana's now totally legal. And that's something that they're dealing with. And that seems to be working out okay. They're taxing it. They're making a lot of money off it, so the politicians are happy. People can now smoke a joint, and, the people that want to smoke a joint can smoke a joint. The people that don't want to smoke a joint don't have to smoke a joint. That system seems to be working out all right. What would you say to an introduction of a system like that in this country? With regards to marijuana, and then open it up to different layers of...
Well, I accept that in certain places there is going to be examples where, as you say, it works and it's shown to be something that people can then opt in and opt out of. Mm-hmm. I can only speak from my experience here, in the UK, and I think that I go back to what I said to begin with. I think that the best law is law that reflects the needs and identifies and understands the duty to protect people, and therefore imposes legislation that does do that, that controls, that prevents harm, that's informed by society and research and learning.
But if people want to, here's my question: you can put all those laws in, and there are all these laws about stuff like heroin, for example. You can't get heroin in legally,
Right.
and the government makes sure that happens through lawmakers, make sure that you can't go to the pharmacy and buy heroin. Yet you can go up to the roof and jump off. And what I'm saying is, how far do you go to protect people from themselves? Is people want to smoke a joint, they'll find a way to smoke a joint and go into a prison. People want to get fucked up, they'll do it. That's people. Some people are like that, and how far do we go to protect people from themselves when we're trying to protect everybody else? You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of a nutty system.
I do to an extent. I think we have a duty to go as far as we can, reasonably and fairly,
Right.
whilst being alive to the fact we live in a democracy.
Right.
I think society, at the same time, has a duty of care to itself, and I think people as individuals have a duty of care if they're capable and able to look after themselves as best they can and should. But I also think that law is something that should reflect to a large extent the best interests of the community or the society that it legislates on.
I guess that's democracy, isn't it? More people would rather not take drugs, so the society is geared towards a system that.
Well, I don't know what the figures are for that. I don't know what percentage of people in the UK believe that, say, for example,
There must be a YouGov poll. Have YouGov polls on everything.
Yeah, there'll
That's
be
the world
something,
we live
won't
in. So what are the alternatives then? The war on drugs, I mean, I've done research myself. I don't think it's working. I think there's an incredible gulf of people that have been forgotten about because they maybe buy too little to get their door knocked down by a few people, but they're still very much in a bad place.
I think the distinction is the people who take drugs, for me, need support, need help, need assistance. I think the people that don't take drugs but sell them,
Right,
are the people that that perhaps are largely in need of control. Through
regulation,
through legislation,
right,
through criminalisation.
I agree with what you said. I think that was an interesting point, what you said about the people that don't take them but sell them to people that are in a really bad place. So do you think that's where the war on drugs should be actually fighting, instead of, say, arresting people for 2 joints and throwing them away for 5 years?
No, I think it's. I stand by my view. I think it's, from my experience, I think it's helpful and it's good for society to see and treat and respond to people who are addicted to drugs or who take drugs as victims largely, and to support them away from the habits and away from the addiction. And I think the people that profit from it, the people that are found to be selling and dealing are and should always be legislated around in order to prevent them and to reduce them from doing that.
Because I guess it's the people that...
Yeah, because you're perpetuating misery, aren't you? If you're not doing that, and there is a total move towards decriminalisation in every sense, then those people that are taking a drug which is bad for you will get that drug more easily and more often. There will be less legislation around the people that supply it, or none, if it's decriminalisation. And whilst we then understand, as I said to begin with, society knows much more about the later effects of it, like your dentist and the drug.
Right.
We allow those takers and those addicts to reduce into further demise by decriminalising the very people that supply it.
So there is a difference then between legalising and decriminalising? Is there? For everyone at home.
Well, I think the position that is decriminalisation suggests that you have a position of criminalisation.
Right. So you
begin with on the basis that you already have a set of laws.
Right.
You then you then remove or...
So that would be your system of locking up unlicensed, say we had licensed drug pharmacists. Drug dealers as we have them now would be unlicensed drug dealers and could be locked up under that hypothetical law.
I think it's right and proper to continue to have good, strong, robust, practical legislation that protects the vulnerable by criminalising the supply and the manufacture of drugs.
Right.
Because, as a society, we see and understand now, to a far greater depth, the effects of, say, heroin and cocaine on a human brain or on a human body.
Right. So you don't think heroin should be legalised in any form? Say we were going.
When you say legalised, what do you mean?
I mean,
heroin should be legalised.
So we have a system currently that means if you get caught with heroin, bad things are going to happen to you. Whether you're covered in your own shit in the street or whether you've got, kilos of it.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is proposing that you look at the system they have in Denver, where you have to go to a pharmacist to get it. You have to go to a pharmacist to get marijuana. I'm saying extend that out to where if you need a shot of morphine or a shot of heroin to get through your day, you have a card like people do for medication now. You go to a pharmacist and they fucking scan it and then they give you a shot of heroin in a controlled environment with a clean needle, and then you go about your day, and once a day you come present that card maybe on your way to work and you get your shot.
But that's not decriminalising in how you describe that. That's changing the law.
And so that's
just moving
legalisation.
Well, it's not. For me, I think it's redefining the route by which you obtain it.
So is that the route we should be taking? Do you think there's more? Do you think there's an opportunity to help more people by taking the route that we've just described? The changing of the law.
You mean where you go to a designated location? You obtain the drug and all the rest of it. I think there is some good argument for it. There are some positive factors for it.
Such as?
Well, you drive away, you drive down the marketplace for those who are profiting from that arguable misery.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? They said if you legalise, I can't remember where I read it. If you legalised cocaine, for example, and you regulated cocaine, you could put 90% of the cartels out of business overnight. There's got to be.
Yeah,
there's got to be arguments.
Very powerful and strong argument. I just happen to believe that we live in a country where everything is allowed except that which is legalised and legislated against.
Right.
That makes us a democracy.
Portugal is also a democracy, and they have a totally legalised system that works. Addiction is down. Just look up Portuguese legalisation of drugs. They had a sizable dip after they legalised all drugs. Okay. They had a real sizable dip in addiction and drug-related deaths. A real noticeable dip. So there's a living, working argument there that says that works. That has an invisible impact. What's the drop?
Portugal decriminalised the use of all drugs in 2001.
Right.
Weed, cocaine, heroin.
Okay. What was the drop-off in drug deaths, like percentage-wise? Find that out.
Yeah.
Cool. So there was a drop in drug deaths, and that's got to be a good thing because that's what your side are here for, to protect us from dying of drugs. So if that system stops more people dying of drugs, surely it's a no-brainer. Or is it?
Yeah, as I said before, there's a lot of positive argument to that. There's a lot of positive factor to that. I don't know how, Portugal is a country, obviously, as is UK, and I don't know whether, as a society, it would work here. I'm not sure.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think the society. You're looking to compare two different countries, two different societies, two different sets of people, two different histories, two different attitudes to society.
Right.
Not that one is better or worse than the other, but they are different to a degree. It's that argument, isn't it? What works here might not work there. What works over there might not work here. So on. I just happen to have the view from the experience I have that that there should be good, clear, fair, and robust legislation to prevent people from.
I mean, I don't think
harm.
I don't think it's a free for all in Portugal. I don't think there's like a crack dispenser.
No, I think that's an important fact as well. We can surface skim a statement like that. It's been decriminalised and this is happening. That's clearly not the whole argument, or certainly not the whole picture. Not argument, but certainly not the whole picture. And there is likely to be other facets to that, and resultant effects of that change. But I'll accept I'm not aware of, but it can't be the whole of the picture.
Yeah.
So this is from a website called Transform. It's about getting drugs under control.
That sounds good.
Although the number of newly diagnosed HIV cases among people who inject drugs in Portugal is well above the European average, it has declined dramatically in the last decade, so falling from just above 1,000 people to 56 between 2001 and 2012.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's excellent.
I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's very good.
So, you'd say that there's got to be more focus on changing the law if we're going to get it under control?
No, I think there's got to be more focus on treating, or rather, there's got to be a... I think it's healthy to think that there's got to be an attitude towards seeing drug addict as a victim rather than first of all.
Right.
That
comes with compassion society, though.
Yeah, and I think that's right to do that. I think we would get more from out of the problem if we were to do as much as we can to ensure that those people are supported and treated to reduce their addiction or to eradicate their addiction.
So you think we should be putting more resources into treating people who have these small habits that become big habits, or the big habits that kill, as opposed to just throwing them in jail?
Intervention and prevention is clearly the way to go. If you can stop it before it starts, it's like the fire analogy, isn't it? In the forest fire.
It's a dangerous thing to do with people, though. Fighting a war before it started, stopping someone taking drugs.
No, I don't think it's a war. Well, I don't think
it is a war.
I don't think it's a fight to start. What I'm suggesting is real investment, say for example, in school education.
Okay.
Intervention and prevention at an early stage, whereby we are heavily invested in communities, and I think that is happening in the UK. I think that's starting to happen. I think that's a part of strategy that is occurring now. I think it's something that's always going to be a good idea.
Do you think
to educate people at a young age, at an impressionable part of their lives, to give people clear facts and to give people a clear understanding?
Right. So
because they go on to be the adults of tomorrow. They go on to be the grown-ups of tomorrow that make those decisions. You aren't always going to be behind that person to say don't do this or do that.
What about kids that are getting their education at school, but their education in their school happens to be in a low-income neighbourhood where drug use is more prevalent because people have no real prospects? They see themselves having no prospects. They see themselves as being forgotten by society, so they get high because that's how they escape that drudgery. Do you think education works there? Because it doesn't appear that 30, 40, 50 years of kicking doors in has. How do you change that? How do you change hearts and minds? As opposed to it's good educating everyone, obviously, but education will take differently in different areas. A more economically viable area will have less drug addicts than a less economically viable area.
Yeah, I think possibly right to an extent there. I think that the thing about hearts and minds in education, it takes a long time to show results.
Right.
because you're invested in, Generation A, and it's not until you get to Generation B, or rather Generation A has grown up and had children, that you can see some of the alteration and change. It is a long game. It's not a short term. I accept that totally.
So we're still waiting for the results on that.
It's not a short term fast fix.
Do you think we're still waiting for the results on that?
Yeah, potentially.
How long have people been educating? How long have people been going into schools to educate kids on drugs? Is that a new thing, or is that like a relatively?
No, I don't think it's a new thing. I think in some facet or other we've always
just say no.
We as society, yeah, exactly. That was what 30, 40 years ago, wasn't it?
Reagan, wasn't it?
The Grange Hill thing. Just say no. And, and that was it was the song in the pop charts, wasn't it? It was the song in the charts, Just Say No, and that was, 30, 40 years ago. But I think before even then we were trying to educate people to an extent, whether it was as effective as it is now or as sophisticated as it then became, I don't know. But I think there's always been effort to educate the young, and I think that's the right way to go. I think it also is a case of those people grow up then to respect and to be positive about the laws of the country in which they live.
Right.
I don't think it's always...
So give them a stake in society, give them a share in society.
Yes, pride, respect.
There are people that don't have that, though. There are people that don't feel respected or proud of where they're from, or proud of themselves, because they feel like the governing body, whoever they are, left or right, has let them down. I mean, you just take it on the chin and accept that you're never truly going to get rid of drugs, and maybe that is the place to just keep kicking indoors, or do you educate hardly? Do you know, it goes back to my original point, how far can you go to stop something before it happens, before you cross the line between invasion of privacy? You see what I'm saying? It's a nutty
You're not I don't think you're invading privacy if you're complying with the law and you're acting on behalf of and underpinned by the power that the law creates. I think you've got to look to the law itself before you make decisions about whether it's invasion of privacy or not. But if the law that's made is founded on fair, clear premise, and it's formed for good, and it's formed for the right reasons,
right,
and it's voted in for the right reasons, then it isn't going to be wrong.
How do you start that? There's a lot of shady characters make a lot of money over making sure that certain laws get passed, and lobbyists and stuff, and there's a lot of that in the energy business, obviously. So I can imagine there's an element of that in the drug enforcement business as well. There's a maxim, isn't there, that says there's a war on drugs, but there's no war on homelessness because there's no money in the war on homelessness. Someone's got to be making a buck. People that are selling cigarettes are still making a buck. People that are selling booze are still making a buck. And those two things, I think, are worse for you than maybe having a joint. So, yeah, I mean, you've got to make sure the lawmakers are fair. And
this potentially comes back to where we started, isn't it? It's about society's attitude that goes on in some way to inform the law that's made. You talk about alcohol. We've talked about nicotine.
What's that?
I just want to pick up on that point because a very early form of drug education can be traced back to the 1880s, but it was a war on alcohol.
There you go. And that goes back to the point. Alcohol was seen as the devil. Then public opinion changed on heroin and cocaine and marijuana, but did not change.
Which I think reflects where I was discussing, it's society's attitude which changes, which goes on to then reflect and inform.
So how do you change that?
Well, how do you change any attitude? I think you change attitude by experience, example, and teaching. They say that learning, clears the jungle and puts water in the desert. You clear away the mystery, you clear away the fog and the confusion.
Banning something doesn't clear the mystery away, though.
And you create clarity and knowledge in a way that people can understand.
Right, but banning something doesn't take the mystery away. There's like, I've heard stories of parents who have given their kid a joint to take the mystery away, and then that kid never does drugs again because he knows what he's missing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's people can go out and get fucked up on drink and be sick in a park, and that takes the mystery away. And some people would do that once and then never drink again.
I think it's important for me to be clear about where I'm coming from. You know, we've discussed a lot of facets of it, and it is interesting your view, because I can sense that obviously your view is set, you know, to an extent, which is right. You have your own views. You know, I've met people that are drug addicts. I've met people that have had children that have suffered because they are drug addicts. I have met people who've had lives that have been destroyed because they're drug addicts. I've met children that will never realise their potential because the people around them charged with the responsibility to look after them are drug addicts.
Right.
I've met people, you know, involved in the use and involved in the supply, distribution, manufacture of drugs that are controlled, that cause those miseries. And
so how do you stop that without...
When you've done that, when you've seen that, like anything really, first-hand, in-depth understanding, knowledge, experience of it, I think that leads to a very different attitude towards dealing with, quote unquote, the problem. And yes, I think there are examples and experiences across the planet that show decriminalisation, alteration of law, and you know, setting up and running, you know, outlets that are controlled for the supply, but like you talked about that example earlier, are and do work. You know, I can't argue that. You know, not that I'm here to argue, but I think in my view is that having done those things, seen those people, I still believe in firm, fair, informed, clear, achievable legislation.
So to your mind, there's no mid-ground to be had between a war on drugs and then a reform in the law?
Well, I don't know what the world here. I don't know what society would look like in that situation.
Well, I'll put that. I'm glad you brought that up. I read an article somewhere. Actually, it was Vice. I'll put a link in the description below. That described just that. What would a legalised drug system look like? And it said, and it went up through all the drugs. It said you could, for example, go to a designated house. Or an area, like you go to a gin bar now, you would go to a mushroom bar and you would be in a safe environment with someone looking over you who definitely isn't on shrooms, and you go and you take a gram and you go to fucking Neptune or wherever in a safe environment. You could go and buy weed from a weed distillery, you could buy cocaine and heroin from a pharmacist.
I think that's part of the point. I think that's
from a pharmacist on a registered card, like sure. You'd need, you get a prescription for antihistamine or whatever.
But I think that's part of the point. We've accepted, I think, in society to a greater extent that the use of certain drugs has long-term negative effects on your biology and psychology.
Right. For a lot of people.
So for me,
right.
Is not then society's duty and obligation in a fair, even democracy to protect those people by setting legislation that prevents it from happening?
Absolutely. But I can't think
you've just said there that okay, we're not winning the war. That the war's costly. If war's the right word, so we decriminalise and alter how you can access it. But people are still continuing to take those things that harm and destroy them long term, physically or psychologically.
But you could say the same thing about alcohol.
Yeah,
we have plenty of state-sponsored support for people who can't handle alcohol, and we have a nation of people, also a nation's worth of people that can handle alcohol.
Yeah,
we had a drink before we came on, and we're handling it fine. I hope. It's one of those things where there is definitely a balance. There are people that can't handle it, and there are people that can have, a couple of glasses of wine and be totally fine. Alcohol is no different, is no more or less a drug than marijuana. So why is one legal and one isn't? Well, that goes back to what we mentioned before about there's a reason. Someone's making money off having alcohol legal. The government puts fucking, you will die if you smoke this, but we still sell it. You know, that seems to be a really crazy way to operate a democracy. That doesn't seem like a democracy. That seems like a government pandering to make money off some people and not others. You know, how much revenue did marijuana legalization make Colorado in taxes? It's been legal there for a couple of years now. They were the first state to go, I think.
We'll find out.
Thank you, producer Lauren, checking the facts. So, what does that say about society? That sounds a little bit hypocritical.
Legal marijuana sales totaled $1 billion in Colorado last year.
Okay.
There
Sounds
was
pretty good.
also a article in The Independent, this is more UK based,
Yeah. We'll link
that cannabis legalization in terms of licensed sales through shops, polls revealed 47% in
47% what?
support of legalization selling in shops, 39% opposed it, 14% had no opinion. But the Lib Dems, looking at this project, proposed that they that after they commissioned this study, it would generate $1 billion of tax revenue in the UK.
That last bit sounds a bit hokey, considering those two figures are like. It sounds like they just looked at Colorado and went, "Oh, £1 billion."
It may well save money, but it doesn't save lives. Every person I ever met on drugs said one thing, and here's the thing. I wish I wasn't on them. You know, it's like the alcoholic, isn't it? At some level, when you pin that person back and you break it all down, I guess, and I'm generalising, I accept, but 99% of them will say, I wish I wasn't on them. So...
But that isn't how 90% of people feel about drugs. Because you come from a certain background.
How 99% of the people that are on them feel about it.
Right, but that's...
Which is the demographic we're talking about.
Yeah,
the cohort of society we're discussing. Because
£1 billion in tax says that there are people...
What I've never found, and being here to talk about my experiences, what I've never found is somebody saying, yes, I'm addicted to substance X. I wish it was easier to get and it was legalised. What they have said is, I wish I wasn't on them. Right.
I guess what we're talking about is two different kinds of people. You're talking about someone who is suffering with the disease of addiction. I'm talking about someone who... you're talking about someone who's suffering from the disease and addiction who does drugs because they can't help but do drugs because they're wired that way. I'm talking about someone who can do drugs and doesn't suffer with the disease of addiction. You see? There's that willingness or that wiriness up top. Some people are wired to want more and more and more drugs. Some people are wired to have a little bit and then stop because they're handling it.
But then that makes that a very risky application, doesn't it? To change, if you're changing things to work with people that want to take and can choose to opt in and out and not become addicted against those people that take that become addicted.
Wouldn't that? I guess if you're not fighting fires by locking up addicts, though, you probably have more money to make sure that people in a legalised society wouldn't get addicted. Because we'd have $1 billion.
I don't think it would. I don't think it would. I think I think every human being on the planet has the capacity to become addicted to something.
Right.
I think you're getting into, perhaps I'm not the right person to talk about it, but psychologically and physically and biologically, I think there's a capacity in all people to become addicted to something.
That's a pretty scary...
There's an addiction...
Well, it's a pretty scary theory, isn't it?
Addiction is a psycho and clinical...
Yeah.
It's not a area of expertise for me, and I won't say much more, but I think if you're saying, well, I'd look at decriminalisation for that part of society which can take and opt in and out as and when they choose...
Isn't that just favouring one elite over another? Like we're doing now, we're favouring society over.
And I think that's wrong. I think it's wholly wrong to favour one aspect of society, make life easier for a piece of society that decides it's not going to be addicted but wants to dabble, against dealing with the very real, tragic, horrifying issues of the people that are taking it currently, because we have to work with what we've got presently. We can't restart things. And saying to those people, excuse me as I sneeze, saying to those people, well, you know, we're going to decriminalise it, and if you're trapped and caught up in that, well, then that just prolongs your misery. And that's the point I'm making. I think we've got to make sure that we treat the people that are addicted to the drug properly and rightly, look after them, protect these vulnerable
We don't do
individuals.
that now, though. Not as much as we should.
No,
Jails
possibly
are
not.
filled with people. Prisons are filled with people who got locked up on having a little bit of marijuana or a little bit of cocaine, and now going to prison to learn how to get marijuana and cocaine much more easily. There's loads of drugs in prisons. Anyone that says there isn't doesn't know, you know. So I guess what the conclusion we've come to right now is that I can infer that you think the system as it is should change, except for more treatment, abstinence-based.
No, I don't think it should change. I think what it should be doing is trying to continue to do what it does now. You know, we've set law.
Right.
The law is set by a democratically voted by a democratically voted population. The laws are set following informed decisions based on research and analysis and all this kind of thing. And I think that we shouldn't be looking at decriminalising a part of law, because for me, to see the people that have been, to have seen those people that are on that drug, we're then saying, okay, carry on taking, carry on using, but it's just going to be easier. It's like building the shop closer to where you live.
So why do you think so many states?
Because we accept, and I think I think I'd probably be right to say this, we accept that long-term use of cocaine, heroin, marijuana, amphetamines and so on and so forth is not good for you.
No, I mean, I'd only go so far because I don't have the neither of us do really have the medical background. I mean, I would say there's more an argument to say that if I wouldn't say that if you smoked a joint once a week for the rest of your life, at the end of your life, you'd be in the same state as someone that took a shot of heroin every week for the rest of their lives. That can't That's
I don't know about that. I am generalising. I'm saying it's not good for you.
Right.
It's not good for you, and I'm basing that on what I've heard, what I've seen, what I've
What
read.
about those people that say, "Oh man, cannabis is naturally occurring, so it must be here for us to use"?
But aren't they high at the time?
Well, yeah. I'm just saying. I'm high now. I'm not. I'm joking.
Is that a skewed view? Is that a biased view, possibly?
Well, aren't all views biased? Jesus, maybe we are high. Listen to us.
Possibly.
So what about, because right now the leader of the free world is, the about to almost leader of the free world is a guy who's really into populist politics. And what doesn't get reported is when Trump got elected that election, they have loads of stuff on the ballot paper, one of which in a few states was, and look that up, the states that have just legalised marijuana, and 3 or 4 new states have also voted for marijuana, and that's gone into effect. So it's happening in America. Not like heroin, not our sort of hypothetical heroin chemist, but more and more states in the United States of America are legalising marijuana, and they think California might do it. Where California goes, so does the Union. So what happens if America has a country, maybe 20 years, a couple more elections, has total legalisation of marijuana? Doesn't that kind of, not pressure our government, but you see what I mean? It pushes where America goes, we usually follow. So doesn't it make sense that there will be some kind of legalisation by at least the end of the next decade?
I don't know. I think where that goes is America legalises marijuana.
Right. And you think there'll be no knock-on effects in the UK? I guess if our politics can stop for a minute to just sort its shit out, but.
Well, I think the only thing we can confirm there is that if that happened, America would legalise marijuana.
Yeah, how many states was it?
5 states.
5 states in the last election.
For recreational purposes, including California recently.
California went, so goeth the Union. I can see it happening. That'd be nuts, wouldn't it, to have a superpower where you could just get high everywhere all the time? I mean, it's like smoking over there. I don't think there are certain places you can do it when you're out of your own home. Like you have smoking, or you used to have smoking cafes in this country. But I mean, that would be really interesting, I guess, to see what America looked like.
I don't think
so
you
many
can.
years
I don't
down
think
the
you can look in many directions and find positive ticks for the use of controlled drugs. So
Right.
therefore, I think
Not even Portugal. Those people on
so
HIV.
therefore, I think it's society's obligation, in the absence of everybody doing the right thing all the time, to legislate to protect people from those drugs.
Right. I guess if you never do it, you never gonna know.
If a school of thought came along, or if research and trials and what have you, or whatever it was, understanding, knowledge came on to say, well, actually it's a good thing, then we'd be having a different conversation. But I think you can't look in many directions and find positive ticks for the use of controlled drugs. And in my experience, I have never seen any positivity, any happiness, any good outcomes for or by the use of drugs. In fact, I've seen completely the opposite. I've seen things that are completely the opposite. So for that simple reason, I think that what we have needs supporting, what law we have needs upholding, and what effort we are making needs focusing on and needs pursuing, so that we support the people that are addicts.
And what about, okay, that's addict support. I get that. Stop people who can't handle drugs getting drugs. I'm on board with that, for sure. What about things like medical use for like cannabis resin? Because cannabis resin has really good effects on people that have seizures and marijuana and stuff.
There are other states in the US that do permit
Medical use
of marijuana, although it's not legal for recreation.
Right. So
I think that's a very different question. I think if it can be shown and clinically through research and analysis in laboratories and what have you, that and trials that using, substance X, product X, whatever it may be, can assist a medical condition like, I don't know.
they give cancer patients joints, don't they?
If it can be shown to medically, clinically assist and improve that condition, then there is argument for greater research into it. Absolutely.
Right. And if that research, let's just hypothetically say that people were looking at the use of medical marijuana and they found that, oh shit, if you smoke a joint a day, your IQ goes up by 10 points in a year or whatever. Do you think then there would be more of an argument for recreational legalisation?
I don't know, does it?
I don't know. I wouldn't. I never run out, so.
A joke. I think that...
That's all happened is joke.
I think it's... Again, I'll go back to what I've just said. If it can be shown clearly, safely, through research and analysis and all the rest of it, that it can positively affect a condition... such as cancer or whatever, anything, then there's obviously good reason to research into that and to trial it.
Right.
But I don't think without that clear, deep understanding, we should then just carry on and use that as a basis to start legalising and
But that's happening. That's happened in 5 states as of the last election.
The research hasn't, though, has it? I personally am not aware of it. To add, I'm not aware of seeing clear...
Watch the comment section light up now. Wikipedia articles.
Yes, Wikipedia is a great place for fact.
Yeah, man.
And
I think that's a great place to stop. It's been a fucking pleasure, man. We'll have to have you on again.
Yeah.
And we'll light up and it'll be awesome.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, it's been good.
You can follow us on Facebook, Thinking Out Loud Podcast, and you can follow us on SoundCloud as well. We will be back soon. Thank you very much for listening.